Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we discuss, is there a schedule when it comes to sowing your winter sowing seeds? So let's go. I'll be making a lot of videos on the winter sowing process. I'm going to try to keep them short and sweet so that you can watch them in little bite-sized morsels and take in things as I'm researching them for you as well as for me. I've been winter sowing for a number of years with a lot of success, but also I've learned things along the way. And during this series of videos, I'll be sure to share all of that with you. But before I begin, I want to give a special thank you to Trudy Davidoff. She is the official creator of the winter sowing process. She basically started this process sometime during the early 2000s, and she actually worked with the USDA to basically come up with this whole concept of winter sowing. So even though I talk about winter sowing in my videos and a lot of other people do as well, and there's a lot of information on the internet, it's important to give credit to the person that came up with this process. In fact, I encourage you to go to Facebook and check out a very good group that you can join for free. It's called Winter Sowers, the Original. I'll put a link to it down in the description box below, but it's open to the public. And what I really love about it is it's a great discussion forum. And there's a link on there that says guides that I also like to go through and just read a lot of great information when it comes to winter sowing. In fact, Trudy is an admin on that group site, and there are a lot of other moderators that are working on that site to answer a bunch of questions. So you can always ask me questions, but honestly, I think that place is a wonderful place to not only ask questions, but also to read along and see what Trudy or other admins are saying. When it comes to winter sowing, you want to get started with all the supplies that you need. I made a video recently going over all of that. What I'll do is put a link to that down in the description box below, and I'll link it up above as well. So it's important to know what are the supplies that you need when it comes to winter sowing. But then I feel like the next thing to know is, now that you have your supplies, when can you start winter sowing? And that's what this video is about. Even though I've been winter sowing for a number of years, I still did some due diligence, I did some research, and I compiled all of that into this video. I'm here to tell you, when it comes to a winter sowing schedule, it's not set in stone. In other words, it's not one size fits all for everyone. So let's go over that a little bit. The first thing you need to know is, where do you live? Do you live in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? I know that most of the people that watch my videos live in the northern hemisphere, but there are some people that live in the southern hemisphere. And it's important for me to talk about that because I want to make sure that this information that I'm sharing applies to everyone. So for me, I live in New Hampshire, and based on that, I know that I live in the northern hemisphere. It's also important to know, when do you winter sow? There are things called spring sowing and fall sowing that have come along the way, but it originally started with winter sowing. So winter sowing happens during the months of winter. Now you might be wondering, okay, that's great, but when is winter? When are those months? Well, for the northern hemisphere, the winter months typically fall starting with December 20th-ish, somewhere around the 20th, and that's known as winter solstice, and it ends near the end of March, somewhere around March 20th-ish. And I say ish because every year that beginning and end date can change for winter months, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. And for my friends in the southern hemisphere, your winter is the opposite of us. So your winter months are in the months of June, July, and August. The world is one big space. It's so cool to think that when we have winter here in the northern hemisphere, in the southern hemisphere, they are enjoying their summer months. And when we're enjoying our summer months, they're enjoying their winter months. So I mentioned earlier, when you winter sow, you want to wait until when the winter solstice begins, which is around December 20th. However, there are other things that you want to consider. And the main thing you want to consider is your own climate. You want to wait until your nighttime temperatures are consistently below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you might be wondering, why do we have to wait until the winter solstice or when our nighttime temperatures drop to 50 degrees Fahrenheit? The reason is, you don't want to sow seeds, have them prematurely germinate just for a frost or a freeze to come in and take them all out, and then they die. So you're basically waiting for that period of time, that coldest period of time, when you know that it's safe to go ahead and sow the seeds so that they don't germinate too early. But this year, that got me thinking, okay, that's all fine, but I'm looking at my 10-day forecast right now. And I also know my own climate. We get very cold here in New Hampshire, and I don't foresee my nighttime temperatures going above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be simply amazing. So why can't I start now? Why do I have to wait until the winter solstice? And I just wanted to throw that out there as food for thought. Can I start winter sowing earlier here where I live? Maybe where you live, you can't and you need to wait until the winter solstice. But maybe I want to start a little earlier based on my climate and how I know my weather patterns to be. Let me know in the comments below if you live in the northern hemisphere and if you've started winter sowing before the winter solstice. Why did you start before then and how was your success rate? Also, what did you sow and where do you live? Because maybe, just maybe, I want to start winter sowing before then. I think it would be fun. It would be a fun experiment, wouldn't it? But remember, that's based on my climate. I'm just throwing that out there. Now let's deep dive a little bit more into when and what to winter sow. During the winter holidays, some people have time. They have vacation time going on. So they just basically set up shop. They get all their containers, all their potting mix, all their seeds, and they sow everything all at once. And yes, that can include perennials as well as annuals. But then other people, like myself, like to sow in increments. And a lot of times that's just based on time. I don't have time to sow everything all at once because I like to sow a lot of seeds. So for that reason, I like to sow in increments. What I'm saying is you want to winter sow based on a schedule that works best for you. You'll often hear, no matter what you do, you want to start with those hardy perennial seeds. And actually that makes a lot of sense. Many, not all, hardy perennial seeds need a cold period of time in order for those seeds to break down and be able to germinate. Could you take those seeds and put them in your refrigerator and give them that cold period? Absolutely. But that's what I love about winter sowing. Here where I live, we have such a long winter, such a long cold period of time. I want to let Mother Nature help me out, and I want to take those perennial seeds and go ahead and winter sow them, and they will get that cold period that they need. And then after I've sown all of my hardy perennial seeds, then I can focus on the hardy annual seeds as well as the tender annual seeds. If you wanted to though, again, if it was the holidays, you could just sit down and do all of those seeds in one day. This video is not meant to go into detail with what are hardy annuals, what are tender annuals. It's more just to talk about that time frame of when can you start seeds. For my friends in the Southern Hemisphere, I want to hear from you, because not only do I read your comments, other people read the comments as well. So please tell me, when do you winter sow? I know you have the months of pretty much June, July, and August. Do you winter sow your perennial seeds in June? And then do you do the more cold hardy annuals in July? And then do you do the tender annuals in August? Or is it something different? Let me know in the comments. So I mentioned earlier that many perennial seeds need a cold period of time in order for them to germinate. I love collecting a ton of perennial seeds, and I have no instructions on those perennial seeds, so I don't know when it comes to each of those seeds how long of a cold period they need. But I found a great resource that helps me with figuring all this information out. If you go to a website, which is Prairie Moon Nursery, I'll put a link to the website down below. And if you go to the area where their seeds are, and you find a seed that they're selling that you also have, there's a section on there that tells you how long of a cold period is required for that seed before it can germinate. So for example, it might say C30. That means it needs a cold period of 30 days. Or C60, 60 days of a cold period. C90, 90 days of a cold period. You might be thinking 90 days. Yes, some seeds actually need a 90-day cold period before they can germinate and sprout for you. So I always like to do my homework. I like to research all the hardy perennial seeds that I plan on winter sowing and looking up how many days of a cold period they need. So that's a big reason why you want to start with those hardy perennials when it comes to the winter sowing process, is to make sure that those perennial seeds have a long enough time of a cold period. So if you waited until, let's say, March, for example, to winter sow all your perennial seeds, there's a chance that those seeds don't get the cold period that they need, and they may not germinate for you, or they may not germinate as well for you as they could have. Winter sowing is definitely meant to be easy and it's meant to be fun, but it's not a set it and forget it type of thing. It's important to know the seeds you're starting and where you live. Where I live, my growing season is very short. Some people have asked me before, well, have you ever winter sown peppers or eggplant or begonias? And those are just some examples of plants that have a long days to maturity, which means from when you planted the seed until you get a flower or until you get fruit. Based on my zip code and where I live, my growing season is very short. That growing season period is from my average last frost date until my average first frost date, that window in between. And that's just important to keep in the back of your mind if you do want to winter sow some of those tender annuals. So just as a recap, winter sowing is sowing seeds during the winter months. Winter months are about 3 months long. You can sow all of your seeds at once, but just know that your nighttime temperatures should consistently be well below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If you want to winter sow all your seeds all at once, that's fine. I've never done that, but I know some people have. Or you can have it in stages where you're starting with those hardy perennials first, and then the hardy annuals, and then the tender annuals. I'm a big fan of documenting things when it comes to my garden. So for winter sowing, I like to keep track of it in a spreadsheet. I suggest you either use a spreadsheet or you just write it down on a piece of paper, or you can put it in your phone and just write down when are you sowing your seeds. You can put down when you first see germination. I don't do that, but I know some people do. They like to document when their seeds germinated. But then also it's good to document if you ran into an issue. For example, if a frost came and took out the plants. That way you know, all right, maybe you should be starting those seeds a little bit later. I have a lot of other videos on my channel that have to do with winter sowing. I'll put a link to that playlist down in the description below. And I'll continue making more videos having to do with winter sowing, and I'm trying to do them step by step, a little bit in a chronological order, just in case you want to follow along. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.